name is Crystal Asbury Burnett, and I am a health and wellness coach, a certified personal trainer, and the co-owner of Infinite 30 Green Country in Owasso, Oklahoma. And I am so pleased you've joined us for this episode of the Infinite Possibilities podcast. In each episode, we provide you with inspiration, insights, and ideas that can help you personally unleash all of the infinite possibilities in your life. The world is changing rapidly. So much of what we see is out of our control, but we can control certain things. We can control our growth in relationship to wellness, both in our body and in our mind. No matter how much time you have or don't have, you can always control your thoughts. You can still work on yourself. Now is the time. To say that we are living in a unique time is a massive understatement. We have seen tremendous change over the last 20 years. But in the last year, we've seen change that we never expected. We've seen a change with the COVID-19 and all of the side effects of that virus. And the level of fear and uncertainty that we have in our life has been escalated. And how we react to it has been affected too. We are bombarded with social media, both Facebook, Instagram, the news, as well as other media outlets that basically dictate to us how we feel. So it's our choice. Okay, so this is the first time where social media has had an impact on our level of anxiety and fear and uncertainty. But in these times, we have the opportunity to take charge. If we don't take charge of our thoughts and what we're being surrounded, basically the world will dictate to us our focus. And we need to stand guard and control our minds. Whatever info you're feeding your mind on a daily basis is usually what you'll focus on consistently. And we're going to experience that as what we think life is. So what we focus on definitely expands. So we need to change those factors. We need to change how we look at things. We need to control our fears and our anxieties. In our conversation today with our special guest, we'll be going over some of the tools and listen to the opinion of someone who can give us great insight on how we can do that. It's our choice of what we focus on. So we want to go through that today to better understand how you have that you are in charge of what you think and how you react to what's being surrounded to you in your environment. I am excited to introduce to you today Hannah Tomlinson. Hannah Tomlinson is a national certified counselor in North Carolina. She earned her master's degree in clinical mental counseling at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte and is practicing in the Charlotte area. She works independently with individuals, couples, teens, and she specializes with issues of anxiety, depression, trauma, relationship issues, self-esteem, issues of faith, identity development, with mainly a focusing on couples therapy, premarital counseling, and also counsels with teens. I'm really excited to talk to her today about her relationship with mental health and wellness in general. We both have a focus on wellness, and it's going to be very interesting to talk to Hannah about her perspective from the mental health, because we've always said from the very beginning that wellness is a mind, body, spirit. The mind, understanding our brain and how we deal with things, also our body and how we feed ourselves, exercise, and of course our spirit, how we look and see the world today. So I'm really excited to start our conversation with Hannah, and I welcome you to our podcast. Okay, so what led you into your profession? What was it that kind of drove you into that field?
So I think over a long time, I always had a vision, which I think, a lot of people struggle through their teen years and through college, teeter-tottering on lots of different ideas. But I always knew that I wanted to help people in some capacity. As you know, I was pretty involved in student ministries growing up in high school and college, and I'd volunteer with youth group and summer camp. And so I was around a lot of teenagers, as I became older, I sort of took on a mentor role in different aspects of life. And that became very meaningful to me, especially that connection with teenagers. And so teenagers were the driving factor that made me want to be a counselor altogether. And I still do work with a lot of teenagers as probably a third of the chunk of my caseload. But being on their level and just really being able to relate. And there was something that I was always naturally driven to be an emotional support for people, but I had a desire to be able to do that in a professional way.
So when you think about being a counselor, you hear the word a lot, self-care.
Yes.
So you hear self-care. So, in our field of wellness and weight loss, we're not strictly just weight loss. We have people that just need guidelines, dietary guidelines, but also, we talk about exercise as well. So what kind of what's your thought on the word of self-care and what that means?
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up that, because certainly from a mental health perspective, we have different ideas of what self-care is. And then there's people that aren't involved in any kind of wellness, and they, think they throw self-care out there of, for instance, I'm going to go spend half my paycheck on a new pair of shoes because self-care, which isn't always necessarily a wrong thing. But I think the idea of what it is and what it isn't is important. I think anything to be able to give yourself what you're needing.
Right.
So whether it's I need a break, or I need nutrients, or I need connection, self-care can look like so many things. So I like to explore with my clients, what are the areas in your life that there's a need? Are you running yourself to the ground with work? Do you need some solitude? Are you working or so busy that you aren't having time to cook or make any meals? Like, maybe that's self-care. We think of so many different things, and self-care doesn't look the same for every single person. And so I try to be careful on doing a one size fits all for self-care, but it comes down to the motivation of self-care. What's driving me to do this? And is it to truly care for myself in these areas that are lacking?
Right.
So it's so important. And it is something that I regularly check in with my clients, especially when I can tell that they're stressed and they're putting all of these other things before themselves. It can be, can set us up to end up carrying more stress and pain in the long run.
And I think sometimes in society, we have a tendency to put other people first. And then we realize that we're sacrificing our own, it comes anywhere from mental health to physical health to spiritual health. We just have those voids in our life. I had someone recently discussed with me that she has made a vow to put her phone away at 5 o'clock, that she's just turning off her phone and setting it aside once at 5 o'clock, just to disconnect from that, because it's so stressful for her. And I think you're probably exposed to that with a lot of teens, and they're being exposed to something that when you were growing up, it was just starting.
Oh yeah.
And now kids are overwhelmed with Instagram and TikTok, and so all the social media, and how social media really does play into kind of how we see ourselves.
Absolutely. And something that you said about putting others first, I think that's something in our culture, at least from my observations, is that we are growing up with these values and character of thinking of others and being considerate. And these are very admirable characteristics, and I think ones that would be wonderful to implement into your life. But I think it can turn into extreme. So when you are only thinking of others and not yourself, it's not a benefit in the long run to others, because the old saying of your cup will run dry, then you have nothing left to give others unless you're filling your own tank. So that when we fill our own needs, it actually gives us more to give to people in the long run, which is that balance that we find through life as we work towards, meeting our own needs and others. The social media and just the distractions. I think the generation now with teenagers that I work with, they're presented with challenges that are so invasive. Everyone has a smartphone, and at any time, any day, no matter what, you can access, comparison to other people. You can access just distracting, mind-numbing content, and of course, we could talk about how social media and technology in general can be a benefit, but there's two sides to it.
Right.
And certainly just all of there's just so many outlets for noise, and we can distract ourselves with so many things. But to your point, the person who puts their phone o'clock at 4 or 5 o'clock, puts their phone down, now they are choosing a different mindfulness path, versus whatever's in front of them grabs their attention. They're in control again. And I'm choosing what I'm doing. I'm choosing to prioritize these things today or this evening in these protected hours. So I'm sure there's a lot of benefit to that.
So do you have certain keys like that you kind of follow in counseling to basically give them like a plan, like say, these are things I need you to focus on. So do you lay something out for your clients so that they can kind of have, like we do something as simple as say, when we have somebody that's trying to lose weight, we say, you've got a food journal, you've got to, meal prep, you've got to do all these things. So do you have keys that you use in your counseling that give them some kind of like, almost like a bullet point or a plan?
Yes. So basically all of my work with clients is very client centered. And so I know that you in your industry, goals are a big factor. What are the goals? What's your vision at the end of all this? What do you want to see get out of it? And so one of the questions that I'll ask in the beginning is, how much structure do you want? Some people love the homework. They give me bullet points, give me plans. Other people are there for the process. They just need a space to talk things out, and they're going to implement the things. And so I'm more hands-on or hands-off depending on the need of the client. But typically with a plan, depending on what we discussed, let's say I was talking to a teenager who wanted to be more mindful and reduce their technology usage. I always encourage them to journal first off, because I think journaling is amazing. Just even knowing what's in your mind and putting it on paper, whether it's free flow or journaling something that's upsetting, any themes. But I would look throughout what we talked about that time and say, okay, this seems like this was a really big piece of what you're struggling with. Let's say you really want to turn off the technology, but it's really distracting. How could we break this down in really digestible ways? I'm sure in your field it's the same. If someone came in and said, hey, help me lose 20 pounds in a week, you would be like, yikes. And so if a teenager could feel overwhelmed if they felt like they had to make these huge changes in a very short amount of time. So being able to break down what's attainable, what's within the span of time actually realistic, and what do you want that to look like? And then identifying the struggles. Okay, what are the things that may keep you from doing that? I really like to get them involved and have them set the goals too, and have them set their process, because I think that, again, when a process is our own, when I own my process, it becomes something that I'm more invested in. And so I like to refer to myself as a process consultant rather than the leader. You're the expert of your own journey, but I'm kind of the facilitator of it. So I may come alongside and point out things that I notice that may be helping or hurting. But ultimately, if there's a goal or there's a desire to work on something in between sessions, I really want to empower the client to take those steps.
I love the word that you said, facilitate, because we always tell people in our industry, we facilitate a program. So we really do try to do the same thing. And we do break it down. We break it down on a daily basis, because they have a coach that they are in contact with on a daily basis. So, because you're right, someone comes in and says, I want to lose 50 pounds. That's a huge goal. And it's overwhelming, and it'll paralyze them.
Right. But I can imagine in both of our industries, clients that we work with, they've been told just do this, just do that, as if it's made so simple. Like if they just snapped their fingers and made these simple fixes, that everything would be right. They need someone to walk alongside them in the journey. And that's the, I think, the factor that makes the difference, because it's so much easier from the outside to just nitpick and point about changes, but to get in their shoes and get on their level, man, that can change people's lives. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I think too, one of the things that I think in counseling as well as in coaching, because it's there's a lot of similarities, is that they want a partnership. They want someone to say, I'm walking along this journey with you. I've had people come up to me and they said, thank you so much for, whatever, helping me lose 20 pounds. I'm like, you did the work.
Yeah.
I just walked along the journey with you. And that's the thing, I think, in counseling as well. You're just guiding them in a professional manner and giving them the tools that they may not know or have the resources to. And I think probably, how do you feel about, I think, Hannah, I think there's a lot of people that look at counseling as a crutch. What are your thoughts on that?
There's so many stigmas.
Yeah.
Stigma is the word. And that was something that I was warned against from stepping foot into grad school, is because in my environment growing up, counseling was so, thankfully, so validated as a good option. Different family friends I knew were partaking in their own counseling process. And so talking about feelings was something that was always encouraged for me growing up. And so stepping into grad school was a little bit of a slap in the face, in the sense that they said, hey, people out there think that going to get counseling shows that you're weak. And just know that, so that when you're working with people coming in, they may be a little bit rigid, or it's coming from a place of fear. They don't want to look weak. And rather than trying to push past that fear and say, okay, that's not true, so let's just talk about it, validating even that. Let's just start there. Let's start that this is weakness. Tell me about that. Where does that come from? Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a fear that, how they were raised in different situations, there wasn't a lot of room for emotions, or there wasn't a lot of space to process what you're going through. And empathizing with that is a great place to start, because then you can work from there. As a counselor, it's a privilege to be in the midst of someone's vulnerability. It's not my right. And I have to remember that as I work with someone who may be more resistant or reserved to opening up.
Right. And I think you have to, bring yourself to their level so that they can trust you.
Absolutely.
And also know that, that they are, that you can walk them through whatever they may be walking through, because we, whether it's coaching or it's counseling, I think you find people in different stages of their lives. And some people have struggled for a very long time, and some people have struggled, recently. But I think we find that people say, I can't, lose weight because I don't have any willpower. And we really break that down about it's not about willpower.
Mm-hmm.
It really isn't. So a couple of things I do want to ask you, like, I know that you, personal wellness for you is important for you in your life. So how do you think that your personal wellness and your health focus allows you to expand into your profession that you are as a counselor?
Yes, it's so important. And I have to be well to be present in other people's life situations and pain. And I think over time, it's a process, developing different habits and really choosing what's most important to me. So budgeting my time, something I'm always trying to improve so that I can give myself fully to what's important in my life, whether that's personally, professionally. I think for me right now, it's having that time, my own personal journaling time, my own devotional time, prayer time, making sure that I'm connecting with friends socially, or having that phone call with a relative. It can be easy to just get into a routine that feels like a stale cycle. And I never want that to feel the case, especially when I'm working with people that, people's lives. Never want it to become in that nature. time to move my body, time to cook something good. And those are all things like I may focus more on one thing or another. I think trying to be not rigid in my own personal self-care is really important, because then when self-care can become a chore eventually if it becomes too rigid. So being mindful about that and really trying to make it about giving myself what I need so that I can be present with others.
I think it's really, I love that what you said about, putting yourself, you have certain things and it's not just about working out. It's not just about eating. It's about, getting up, like you said, and having your quiet time and centering yourself. I think I always say this and people look at it kind of, I don't know, some people look at it a little differently, but I've always said it's a mind, body, spirit connection. I've always felt that way. And even before, what I do now. I mean, I've been in the wellness industry for a while, but I've always said they're all so interconnected.
And connected. I agree.
And I think if one is weak, then the other one, it's like, I just tell people you have to have some kind of well-rounded process. And I love the fact that you said, we do not search for perfection. We just don't.
Oh gosh, no.
None of us are perfect. And I always tell people when I'm counseling them in the wellness industry, I just say, I struggle just like you. I might, decide I really think that I want that to eat, but I know it's not really the healthiest option, but I struggle with the same things somebody else might struggle with. And I'm human. And that's what I always really relate to them. I have those same struggles that you might have as well, but we all, we have to make a choice. But I think I love what you said about really centering yourself, both for, in all three aspects, that you have to take that time. And how do you see that when you're centered in relationship to when you're counseling people?
Oh gosh, it makes all the difference. I think I'm able to see more objectively. I think that I am taking things less personally. I think that I'm able to be with people with more empathy, really be present with people. When I have my own stressors that I'm carrying in the back of my mind, I think being present is the first thing that starts lacking. I may be there, but not there to my fullest ability with somebody when I'm realizing that there's parts of my own life that are being neglected. Once my own self-care were to be lacking, then I'm not able to connect with people in the way that is really needed.
Yeah, I think and we're at a time of the year where everybody's looking at New Year's resolutions and 2022 focuses. And so people always say, what do you think about resolutions? And I've never been a big fan of New Year's resolutions, just because I think you find that within probably the first, because many, many moons ago, I was a personal trainer and they would, you would just have all these people, January 1, I got to go work out. I got to start exercising. And they'd start exercising about, they might make it to about the middle of February. And then they were like, this is getting tight. I don't want to do this anymore. So I don't really care for the word resolution, because I just remember I'd have all these, I got to do it. I got to do it. And then all of a sudden, they're on a new page. They're doing something else. So what are your thoughts on resolutions? What do you think when you're talking to people about, New Year's coming, just kind of tell me what you think about how you look at that as far as when you're counseling people. Do you see a lot of that?
I do. And, I'm going to avoid putting a blanket statement on if resolutions are good or bad, but I will say this, I think make resolutions, but don't make rules.
Oh, I love that.
Rules are, and I was like reflecting on this earlier, like rules are guilt driven. They are rigid. They are, if I fail one time, I'm hopping off the wagon. If I can't go all in, I'm all out. They're extreme. And so if you do make a resolution, in my perspective, make it more a focus. And so when you get off focus, you just come back to your focus. Some people do like a word of the year. My word for the year is going to be mindfulness, or my word for the year is going to be compassion. I think yoga does a lot of things like that in their practice of kind of come back to your intention. that feels a little bit more freeing, and yet it still has guidelines, can be inspiring, it can be goal oriented. Maybe the outcome would be losing weight or having this amazing health journey, but it doesn't mean it has to look so cookie cutter, because that is discouraging if you feel like you mess up once, all is doom and gloom. So yeah, resolutions, not rules.
I love that. And I always tell people resolutions, I always say, just have a focus, just whatever that is. What is your focus? What does that look like in 2022? Rather than, like I said, that's why for resolutions, I love that you said resolutions. You can look at that a little differently so that it doesn't seem so rigid, because I think that's what defeats a lot of people, is the rigidity of it. Like if
Yes.
I miss one day of working out, then it's like you said, it's all or nothing. I think that's really hard. So do you have like hints and tips that you have for people, like if they're looking at 2022 and they're asking, maybe you're just direction for them, because it's a new year. So a lot of times I do like the fact that it is a fresh start. I
Yeah.
do like that. In 2021, I think I tell people all the time, this time last year, I thought we had a handle on the COVID world. I thought,
Yeah.
okay, this is where we're at. We've got a handle. And of course, now we look at the end of this year, and we're still in the middle of it. And
Yes.
it's a long haul for everybody, no matter what field you're in or where you live. It's very interesting in the COVID environment, in the COVID world. I think the thing that has really imprinted on me is that the frailty of life, number one, but also it's the only thing I've ever seen in my lifetime that affects every single human being.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what country, what age, what demographic, what income level, any person is affected by it. Have you seen that? What has been your perspective on that within your practice this year?
It's really amazing when you think about it, because COVID has had such ripple effects on people. When you're worried about health and wellness, and then when you have to, just your basic well-being, and then being trapped in close quarters during, like, when lockdown was the case, different relational issues. I've definitely seen a lot of heavy hearts and discouragement that have been COVID related, or a compilation of so many different issues that have all sort of stemmed from the pandemic. And being able to label that and name that with clients, I think, is important. The reality is there's so many things we can't control. And so we can sit and make goals for the end of 2022 and still be completely surprised by things that go on in our personal lives, or that go on in the global scheme of things. So being mindful when we're setting goals, there's so many things that could come up, and we have to be kind and understanding that things may not always go exactly as we expect. And can we be flexible at the same time? So when you asked about setting goals with clients, I think anytime when there's a kind of milestone moment, be it the beginning of a new year, or another birthday with somebody, those are great times to reflect on, hey, what was the past year like? What are some themes of this past year? What were some patterns or choices? And then look at, okay, if you look at the end of 2022, what do you want that to look like? With anything that you would want to be different? Is there anything that you want to do more of or less of? And self-affirming of the things that went well the previous year, the growth that they had done between then and now. So it's not all what's to come, but being able to acknowledge our lives are journeys, and we're always growing and we're always developing. And if we did that much in this past year, what could we do in the next year? And kind of going off of that, whether it's the same goal that you have each year to grow in, or if it was, I was focusing on this last year and look what I did. Now I can focus that energy on something else. I think that can always be encouraging for people to take that step back and look at the bigger picture.
And Hannah, that is an amazing insight, because I think a lot of times when we compare, we're looking at the negatives. Like, oh, I
Yeah.
didn't do this. And I love the fact that you're saying, I'm looking at where was I at this time last year to where I am at this time this year. And I
Right.
think that is something that doesn't matter whether it's in weight loss or it's if it's in wellness coaching or counseling, for them to be able to go, look how much growth you've had in the past year, rather than I think society and I think the environment a lot of us are projected into, it's always looking at the negative of, oh, you didn't do this. And I
Yes.
think we need so much of that encouragement to let people know, look how far you've come.
Absolutely. And that's the basis of my counseling process and my philosophy is that we all have kind of this true self that has been able to do amazing things in our lifetimes, and any obstacles that or challenges or difficult maybe choices that we aren't proud of have all come in points when we haven't been our best or truest selves. But all throughout our lives we can probably look back at moments that we're proud of ourselves or we have strengths, and being able to identify those and recognize those haven't gone away. No matter where you are in life, you can still look back at moments and see things that you are grateful for in your journey and be able to look forward in ways that you can implement that in the future too.
Yeah, I think that I love that, because it is one of those things where I think we have a tendency to be hard on ourselves. Um,
Yeah.
we really do. I mean, I tell people, we have a tendency to be the hardest on ourselves, looking at all the things that I didn't do versus the things I have done,
Yeah.
in that year. I always look at New Year's as kind of, a fresh start, but I also think it's a great place for people, like you said, to look back and compare to where they were last year, and maybe reassess where do they want to be, or what are their focuses, or where they want to be in the next year. One of the things that I love that you said was that journaling is a real tool for many things. I always tell people I wasn't a big journal person, and actually my daughter is the one that got me into journaling. She gave me a journal and said, you really should be journaling. And it was at a time in my life where I needed to put those thoughts down on paper. And I've never stopped journaling.
Amazing.
So, but it's sometimes it's maybe 10 minutes. It's not like I'm taking an entire morning of just sitting. It's just, notes and just whatever it might be. And might be something that I listened to or something that I read. And then I go from that. So I think those are things that are very important, for people to look at as they kind of look at a new year or new focus. But I have people that, let's say, the first of every month, they kind of refocus, which I think is pretty amazing. You're not taking a whole year to say, okay, I'm going to refocus. So, we always tell people that. So is there something that you kind of guide people for kind of laying out for that new year at all? Or do you kind of just let it be?
Well, as far as instigating conversation, I may ask questions about what those goals are and kind of like the process questions that we just mentioned. But then at that point, if they connect dots and say, wow, I didn't realize that I haven't really been making relationships, and I've been lonely, and this has kind of caused me a lot of pain and discouragement. And I've reflected on times when I've had friendships that have made me feel very encouraged. In that case, we could talk through, okay, our goals up until now may have been different, but do we want to adapt our goals in our work together? What can we do? What goals can we set together to help expand your social network? What are the obstacles right now that you're facing in order to be more social or to have more friends? Oh, you work too many hours that you don't have. Okay, let's talk through that. Or, oh, you feel anxious in groups of people. Like, let's definitely work through that. So, having the bigger picture, having the end result, and then understanding what's keeping them in the way of that. And adapting goals always. I always tell my clients that any goals that we set at the beginning of our counseling process, they're always adaptable, because the more we learn about ourselves and the more that life happens, the needs change. Mm-hmm. And being able to be flexible with them is something that I try to be mindful of.
So what do you find is some of the things that people struggle with the most?
I would say anxiety and depression are the main mental health concerns. And they're pretty broad as well. So they encompass a lot of things. I think negative self-talk, having lots of negative beliefs about themselves and the world, and that can lead to anxiously trying to be perfect, and to maybe if I just have it all together, then I won't feel so down on myself, or I'm so down on myself, I feel so defeated that the always, the nevers, I'm always going to be a failure. I'm never going to have friends. I'm never going to have the life that I want to live. And so oftentimes that's why you see so much comorbidity with anxiety and depression, because it's like a cycle. The brain gets so anxious over trying so hard to get it right, to be worthy, and then works itself up to the point of crashing and burning because it's exhausting to be anxious. And so then the anxious person now becomes depressed when they feel like I've tried everything and I've thought about it all and I'm never going to get there. And it just becomes a cycle of thought. And I would say that's probably the most common in my work with individuals.
Right. I think mindfulness is really important. And I think one of the things I heard a talk once about, that your brain, the first thing that your brain experiences in the morning, like when you first get up, they say the worst thing to do is to turn the TV on, because that's the first kind of imprint. And unfortunately, the news, the first thing they give you is everything that went wrong since you went to bed the night before.
Right.
And that's the first thing. So they say, the best thing to do in the morning is to either read something that is positive, listen to music, but get your brain kind of wrapped around that.
Right. And I would say that comparison, especially for teens and young adults, comparison is a trigger for a lot of anxiety. It's what do I not have? What do I not look like? Who am I not smarter than? And everything and everyone's highlight reel and everyone's best of everything is right there in front of them. And so we kind of make a faulty comparison between our worst self and someone's best self in a given moment. So yeah, I think a lot of that comparison can definitely spark some anxiety for people.
So as a professional, what do you feel like? I mean, I know that there's a passion and a drive there. So share with us a little bit about that.
I think it's watching people, getting to be a part of people's healing process, getting to watch people truly be free of some of the pain and the heaviness that they come in to counseling with. And, I reflect on some clients I've been working with now since the very beginning, which I have been practicing independently since 2019. So, a good few years in the making, and just to see their journey. In times it's been rockier, times they've been at, breakdown or they feel like they've regressed, and yet progress is not it's not always linear. Sometimes it's zigzag. We have our step backs and then we take a couple steps forward. But it's definitely just getting to be a part of people's stories. And again, the privilege of sitting in someone's vulnerability, that moment when someone looks at you and says, I've never said that out loud, much less to anybody before. I'm really nervous, but I already start to feel a little bit more free, just the fact that I'm not keeping this in anymore.
Yeah.
And just getting to be that person that someone is opening up with. It truly is sacred space.
Well, Hannah, thank you so much for your time and your insight. It was wonderful. I know I can see the passion on your face and your heart, and I really do appreciate you taking your time. And everybody that you work with, I know, is very blessed to have you in their life, and really do appreciate you taking your time to talk with us today.
So today we're going to take a letter out of our mailbag. Today our letter is from Carrie, and Carrie said, I'm enjoying your show, and I was wondering if you could answer a question for me. I don't have time right now to do a diet or get into a serious weight loss plan, but I do want to eat healthier. is there one type of food you can recommend that I could reduce or cut out so I can at least start moving in the right direction? All right. So Carrie, your answer to your question is I feel that it's very important that we don't cut out any certain types of foods. Our body needs all types of foods. We don't want to focus on restricting any one type of food. At Infinite 30 Green Country, one of the things we really do is talk to you about all of the food groups. Proteins are needed for muscle, starches are needed for energy, fats are needed for many things. Brain health is one of the biggest things. We need to take in fruit, simple sugars. We use them for energy. Non-starchy vegetables are used for energy as well. So to say there's one food group that we would cut out, I would say no. We do talk about moderation. So I always tell people that the main three things that we should always focus on every day is an adequate amount of protein, an adequate amount of non-starchy vegetables, an adequate amount of fruits. Then we talk about adding in healthy fats and then starches as needed. So starches are something that you don't have to have every day, but we don't want you just to eliminate them from your diet in general. So as far as answer to your question, Carrie, is we really feel like all food groups are necessary, and that we find when we restrict one food group from a diet, say, or rather than a lifestyle, that people feel restricted and feel like they can't ever have that. And we don't want anyone to feel restricted because, as we well know, diets don't work. The only way diets work is if you're on them. And if you're off them, guess what? You'll gain the weight back. So what we do at Infinite 30 Green Country is teach a healthy lifestyle and teach you individually how to introduce new foods to you to determine what foods work best for Carrie's body. So thank you so much, Carrie, for your question. And I hope that gives you some insight on how to start a healthier eating plan. Today's episode of Infinite Possibilities was edited and produced by Carson Roach-Howell and Bob Beatty. Our executive producer is Georgia Goppert. I'm Crystal Asbury Burnett. Thank you so much for joining me today. You can reach me at infinite30greencountry.com. I would love to hear from you and get your comments about today's show, as well as any other wellness and nutritional questions you might have. In our offices, we offer a program that is not only in store, but we also offer an online program as well. Make sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast platform you use. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and pass it along to a friend. Until next time, I hope you experience a life with infinite possibilities.